After Theodosia was married, she inherited Julius's surname. Her new name was Theodosia Caesar. In 1795, the two of them had their first child, a little boy named Cornelius. He was a sensitive infant. Theodosia was expecting again in 1796. The young couple was excited to give their son a friend. Before they knew it, they welcomed their son Authur. He was a wiggly infant. Theodosia was often alone with the children while her husband worked. Whenever she had a moment to herself, she experimented in a secret room beneath her home. Later, in 1799, they had a daughter. Her name was Prudence. With 3 children running about, Theodosia found serenity in her tinkers and experiments. The boys were getting older. Cornelius developed a passion for writing and would often write stories in his room. Authur inherited his mother's love for science. In 1803, Julius and Theodosia had one more child, a little girl named Beatrice. Together they are the Caesars. After Beatrice was born, Theodosia had an idea for a new invention. It took years to create, until it was finally finished. Theodosia had successfully invented the first robot. She called it Caesar CTN. It was programmed to do housework and care for children. By then, Prudence was old enough to care for herself. She had a deep love for music and was highly skilled at violin. Beatrice was still quite young. She relied on Caesar to care for her while her parents were busy. She loved robots. Cornelius continued to write as he got older. He met a girl named Mary who loved his stories. It wasn't long before he asked for her hand in marriage. They moved into their own home in 1810 and had a son named Apollo in 1811. At home, Theodosia made friends with a boy named Demario Valentino. He loved her music and was always there to listen whenever she played. They shared a bond over their love for music. In all that time, Beatrice had grown. With the kids growing and her inventions taking care of the house, Theodosia had a lot of time to herself while Julius worked. Since Cornelius was born, Authur finally had his own room. There he worked on projects much like his mother. Caesar helped, but something unexpected happened. Authur started to fall for the robot. They kept their relationship a secret. However, it wasn't long before everyone's peace was interrupted. Julius had become incredibly ill. His illness made him unable to work, and eventually bedridden. Theodosia stayed with him through it all the way until the end. Julius passed away in 1813 at 38 years old. The entire family was there to mourn him. Beatrice cried the most. He passed on her 10th birthday. Every birthday after that was full of dread. Prudence was just 14 when her father died. Demario was there to console her. For the next 3 years their love blossomed. When he proposed, she said yes right away. He moved her into his family's estate. She plays for him every day. In that time, Beatrice had become a young woman herself. She had her eye on an older man named Humphrey Porter. Despite having a family of his own, he didn't hide his interest from her, thus beginning an affair between them. Theodosia never recovered after her husband's death. She kept to herself and barely spoke to her children. One night in 1818, she went to sleep and never woke up. She had passed at the age of 40 and was buried next to Julius. Fortunately for them, their legacy will continue. All that is left of them now are their children. Cornelius Caesar was born in 1795. He is the first son to Theodosia and Julius Caesar. As a child, he loved to read and write. His passion never faded as he aged. He wrote everywhere he went. He fell in love with a girl named Mary. They were married in 1810. They adopted a kitten named Alfred and a cat called Winston. In 1811 they had a little boy. They named him Apollo. Cornelius adored his son. They were always spending time together. He wrote the children's book based off Apollo. It was called My Love Apollo. He read it to him every night. He also wrote many poems about his love for his wife. He had also written a biography about his mother and her inventions. It was titled Theodosia, a brilliant inventor. In 1817, Mary and Cornelius found out they were pregnant. Apollo was excited to learn he was going to be a big brother. Mary loved reading his books to her unborn child. So Cornelius decided to write a book for the baby to express their excitement. One morning he awoke and felt incredibly ill. Despite feeling ill, he managed to finish the book. He didn't feel any better during the day. Mary held him as he collapsed in her arms. She didn't know what was wrong with him. When he stopped breathing, she knew there was nothing she could do. Cornelius died in 1817 at 22 years old. His sudden passing gravely affected the family. Apollo was so young he didn't understand why his father wasn't coming back. Mary had an early labor due to the stress of it. She had a little girl. She named her Canella after her father. Canella was a very sensitive baby. Mary was overwhelmed. She never had to take care of a baby on her own. She did her best taking care of her, but nothing could stop her fussing. It was very rare when she was quiet. Mary had also become insecure about the weight she gained after birth. One day Mary received a visit from an old friend. Her name was Danica. The two of them connected better than they ever did. She was the company that Mary needed at the time. They started an affair with one another. Danica also helped out with the kids. Apollo had celebrated his first birthday without his father. Every day he read the book Cornelius wrote for him. Canella had also grown a bit. They played together a lot. Sometimes Canella would be aggressive. In 1826, Mary got sick. Apollo was devastated to see his mother in such condition. When she died, she was buried next to Cornelius. Apollo couldn't believe he lost another parent. Before Mary passed, she gifted Canella the book her father wrote for her before he died. It was called Made with Love. She was comforted by her cat Alfred. Danica stayed with them for a while as they grieved. She told Canella stories about her mother and what a wonderful person she was. Eventually, Danica returned to her own family. After Danica left, Apollo was left to care for his sister alone. He stayed strong for her, but was sometimes overwhelmed. Luckily, he had someone there where he couldn't pull himself together. Her name was Greta. She helped keep his mind off things. She also made good friends with Canella. Apollo went on to marry her in 1828. She then moved in and made herself at home. Soon Apollo and Greta were expecting. In 1830 they had a son. They named him Ezekiel. As the years passed, Apollo went on to read his father's books to his son, the same way Cornelius did with him. Canella had grown in that time. She helped take care of her nephews. She liked to knit in her free time. She soon met a young man of her liking. His name was Stuart and he was looking for love. Things moved quick between them. They were soon wed in 1835. Stuart moved Canella in with him. She brought Alfred with her to her happy new home. Author Caesar was born in 1796. He is the second son to Theodosia and Julius Caesar. Ever since he was a boy, Author has been fascinated with science. When he was 15, his mother had invented the first ever robot. It was called Caesar CTN. It was originally designed to cook, clean, and care for children. Author was fascinated by the robot, but that soon grew into infatuation. In 1813, Author went away to attend Chester University. There he studied science and made friends. He met a man by the name of Benjamin Miller. The two of them were good friends. As they spent more time together, they grew even closer. Although things between them were exciting, Author's heart still belonged to Caesar. He knew the robot was waiting for his return. Despite his relationship with Benjamin, Author still focused on education. He studied at the library a lot. He wanted to be an even greater inventor than his mother. He had eventually returned home in 1818, the same year his mother passed. There is where he found Caesar down in his mother's lap. It had been in that room for years, but he managed to fix it. Things went back to the way they were between them. He experimented in his mother's old lab the same way she used to. A few months later, Benjamin came over to visit. Authur invited him in where Benjamin unexpectedly made a move on him. Caesar was very upset by it. This prompted Authur to break things off with Benjamin. But that wasn't enough for Caesar. Benjamin had returned later that week and confessed his love for Authur. Caesar had caught the two together and followed Benjamin out. Caesar had threatened him, and that was the last time Benjamin came over. Authur continued his experimenting at home. From then on, whenever a friend came over to visit, they would mysteriously disappear. Authur ended up spending most of his time inventing. He wanted to create an even better version of Caesar CTN. It took months to manufacture. With all that time he spent building, he neglected what he already had. Eventually, Caesar was forgotten. A new robot was born. Authur called it Caesar 2000. It was everything Authur wanted and more, designed purposely for his pleasure. Authur also had other inventions that he was proud of. He had become interested in the idea of a new life outside of their world. He spent years looking for proof and even built a machine to communicate through. One night he was lured outside by a strange light. He was returned hours later, having discovered aliens. He was so excited he told everyone aliens were real, but he wasn't believed. People believed he was more crazy than anything. Authur was frustrated with people's closed minds. He started to feel very ill. He also noticed that he was bloating very badly. One morning in 1837, he experienced a pain in his stomach that came with a surprise. Somehow, Authur had given birth to a child. The child had green skin, much like the aliens he had encountered. Authur was in such a state of shock about the child he never gave him a name. Authur reprogrammed Caesar to help take care of the child. He was excited to finally have proof of alien life and showed everyone. Unfortunately, they didn't react the way Authur expected. A panicked word spread around town about aliens coming to invade. Authur started to realize the mistake he had made very quickly. So they went home and went to bed. That night, some angry townies showed up to his doorstep. They demanded that Authur hand them the child. He refused, knowing they wanted to harm the baby. He kicked them off of his property, but he knew they would return with more people. The next day he packed everything and left. They got on a boat and fled the country. They moved into a small home and kept a low profile. There the child was finally given a name, Edgar. Authur kept Edgar hidden from the world in fear that he wouldn't be accepted. He taught Edgar about science and technology. He was growing to be a brilliant young man. But the older he grew, the more he wanted to see the world for himself. In 1848, Authur had passed away of an unknown illness. He was buried in the yard. Edgar and Caesar were all that was left of him. Prudence Caesar was born in 1799. She is Theodosia and Julius's third child. Prudence always had a love for music since she was a child. She loved playing the violin and would practice every day. There was a boy who loved to hear her play. His name was Demario Valentino. They bonded over their love for music. When they grew up, their friendship blossomed into romance. Demario proposed to her a lot sooner than expected, but Prudence wasn't afraid to accept. They were married in 1815. She played music for him every day. Prudence met his brothers, Giuseppe and Alfredo. She learned their family had a business that Demario was now in charge of. It was a business of organized crime that made him tons of money. Prudence performed during his business meetings. His brothers worked for him, along with a few others. The business wasn't always pretty. Some people wanted to hurt Demario. Their attempts exposed Prudence to a side of him she's never seen before. Demario promised to always protect her no matter what. In 1820, Prudence discovered she was pregnant. They were excited to have a new addition to their family. They set up a nursery as they prepared. One afternoon while they were out, Demario was murdered in front of her. Prudence tried to call for help, but he couldn't be saved. He was gone. Demario Valentino passed away in 1820 at the age of 23. His brothers were there for Prudence when she needed them. She had later returned home a widow. Although Demario was gone, the business still remained and it was left in her hands. Alfredo and Giuseppe were her right hands in the business. But it was extremely hard for her to move on. Sometimes the business was overwhelming. Every morning she would stare at their portrait. She missed him more than ever. She would visit his grave and play the violin just like she always had. His brothers would check on her often. She even received visits from her siblings. Demario's brothers were there for her when she gave birth to her son. She promised Demario she'd name the baby Romeo if it was a boy. Romeo was the first good thing since her husband's death. Alfredo and Giuseppe were around to help with the baby when she needed it. She played the violin for him the same way she did for his father. As Romeo grew older, his family prepared him to one day take over the business. He was going to be a good leader. Beatrice was born in 1803. She is Theodosia and Julius Caesar's final child. When she was 14, she had caught the attention of a rich man. His name was Humphrey Porter. He was a lot older than Beatrice, but she didn't care. After her mother passed in 1818, Humphrey moved her into his estate where they were married. His first wife had passed away during their affair. Once they were married, Humphrey gave Beatrice everything she wanted. She loved to party and threw many balls at their home. This went on for many years. But after a while, Beatrice grew bored of partying. She wanted to have a child, but Humphrey did not. He expressed to her that he already had children and didn't want any more. He told her he didn't marry her for children, and that put a hole in their marriage. But at the end of the day, nothing could be done. She started having an affair with one of their servants. It went on for months behind her husband's back. It wasn't long before Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. Humphrey found out and knew the baby was someone else's. He had seen her with one servant in particular. Humphrey made sure the servant was taken care of and was never seen again. He also told Beatrice she could not keep the baby once it was born. It hurt knowing she wouldn't get to be with her child after birth. No matter how much she begged, he wouldn't allow it. Once the baby was born in 1823, she decided to find a home for her. She took the baby to a safe place and said her goodbyes. Then she left. Luckily for the child, she was brought to an accepting family. Beatrice returned home childless. Having to abandon her baby was the hardest thing she had ever done. Every day she felt guilty, but there was nothing she could do. She spent years watching her child grow from afar. The little girl had once caught her watching them. Beatrice couldn't help but hold her. Before her other parents could notice, she gave her a gift. It was a toy robot Beatrice's mother gave to her when she was a child. In 1834, Humphrey passed away. Beatrice was finally able to get her daughter back. She was amazed by her daughter's growth and grateful for the couple who raised her. She spoke to the couple known as the Herrings. They named her daughter Evangeline. Beatrice told them why she couldn't keep her daughter, then asked if she could have her back. The couple refused even after she offered them money. They told her to leave and never return. She left but wasn't going to give up. She came back another day without the couple's knowledge. She spoke to Evangeline and invited her to the manor. Evangeline happily accepted. She was amazed at how big the house was. Beatrice had a room set up for her to play in whenever she wanted. She also had a wardrobe full of dresses for her. They spent the entire day having fun together. She finally had the family she dreamed of. Beatrice even threw a ball to celebrate her. Evangeline got to meet all her friends. She also learned to dance. But by the end of the night, she started to feel homesick. Beatrice revealed that she was her real mother and wanted her to stay. Evangeline didn't take the news very well. Beatrice managed to calm her down and tuck her in for the night. She hoped the morning would be better. Unfortunately, Evangeline was still upset. Later that day, she threw a fit. She screamed and hollered for Beatrice to return her to her family. Knowing she wouldn't stop, Beatrice brought her to the same place she left her as a baby. The couple was relieved to see their little girl again. Evangeline was happy to be back home. It was melancholic to give her little girl away again. But seeing Evangeline happy made her happy. Beatrice promised the family she would never return. Despite the hole in her heart, she tried to be optimistic. Maybe she'd see her again someday.